The echo chamber. Lou Gehrig builds a secret room in his house, where he practices alone using revolutionary training methods that won't be discovered by sports science for decades, creating innovations that modern athletes still haven't fully understood or replicated. The room, which Lou calls his echo chamber, becomes the hidden laboratory where he develops techniques so advanced and effective that they transform him from a good player into a legendary one. For 8 years, Lou spends hours in this secret space every day, working on skills and mental conditioning using methods he invents himself through painstaking experimentation and observation, creating a private sanctuary of perfectionism that no teammate, coach, or even Eleanor fully understands until years after his death. What Lou discovers in his echo chamber about the relationship between mind, body, and performance changes not just his own game, but establishes principles that modern athletes still use today without realizing they're following techniques developed by a 1930s baseball player in his basement. Lou and Eleanor's house, Riverdale, Bronx, spring 1931. Lou stands in the basement of their newly purchased home, envisioning a space that exists nowhere else in professional sports. The basement is empty, unfinished, with concrete walls and exposed beams that most people would see as storage space or workshop area. But Lou sees the perfect environment for something unprecedented in athletic training. A room designed specifically for practicing baseball skills in complete isolation using scientific principles that he's developed through years of observation and experimentation. Lou designs the echo chamber with acoustic properties that allow him to hear every subtle sound his body makes during practice, creating what amounts to a primitive but highly effective biofeedback system decades before such technology becomes available to professional athletes. He covers the walls with a specific type of material that reflects sound back at precise angles, creating an environment where the noise of his footwork, his breathing, his bat cutting through air, and even his heartbeat become audible in ways that reveal flaws in his technique that would be impossible to detect in noisy stadiums or crowded practice facilities. The genius of Lou's echo chamber lies not just in its acoustic design, but in his systematic approach to using sound as a training tool, and his intuitive understanding of what sports scientists will later call multimodal sensory training. Lou discovers that different movements create different acoustic signatures, and that perfect technique produces distinct sound patterns that he can learn to recognize and replicate with extraordinary precision. A properly executed swing creates a specific whistle as the bat moves through air. Optimal footwork produces rhythmic patterns that indicate perfect balance and timing. Even his breathing during different phases of movement creates sounds that reveal his mental and physical state, allowing him to monitor stress, focus, and energy levels through acoustic feedback alone. Lou installs mirrors at carefully calculated angles that allow him to observe his form from perspectives impossible to achieve on a regular practice field. But these aren't ordinary mirrors. Lou positions them to eliminate blind spots and create a 360-degree view of his movements, allowing him to study his technique with the precision of a scientist analyzing data. He can observe the position of his hands, feet, shoulders, and hips simultaneously while hearing the sounds that each movement creates. The echo chamber includes equipment that Lou designs and builds himself. Tools that combine traditional baseball training with innovations that won't appear in commercial sports training for decades, demonstrating an engineering creativity that rivals his athletic ability. Lou creates weighted bats with different balance points to develop specific muscle memory patterns, but his design goes far beyond simple weight addition. He builds bats that shift their weight distribution during the swing, forcing his muscles to adapt constantly and creating strength patterns that transfer perfectly to normal bat handling. He builds a mechanical pitching device that throws balls at precise speeds and locations, allowing him to practice against consistent delivery that he can gradually adjust to increase difficulty. But the device also includes variable timing mechanisms that prevent his reflexes from becoming too predictable. Lou's most revolutionary innovation is what he calls shadow training, practicing complex baseball movements without any equipment, while focusing entirely on the sounds his body makes during each motion, and the visual feedback from his precisely positioned mirrors. In the acoustic environment of his echo chamber, Lou can hear inefficiencies in his movement that are impossible to detect in normal settings. He learns to identify the sound of wasted motion, unnecessary tension, and imperfect timing, then works systematically to eliminate these flaws until his movements create the acoustic signature of perfect technique. This shadow training allows Lou to practice for hours without physical equipment while still improving his actual baseball skills, a concept that won't be formally recognized by sports science until decades later, when mental rehearsal and visualization training become standard practices. The echo chamber becomes Lou's sanctuary for mental training as well as physical practice. The isolation and acoustic properties of the room create a meditative environment where Lou can practice concentration techniques that modern athletes call flow state or being in the zone. Lou learns to use the sound environment to monitor his mental state, recognizing how different levels of focus and anxiety affect the acoustic patterns of his movements. Lou spends 3 to 4 hours in his echo chamber every day, following training routines that he develops through systematic experimentation. He practices hitting against imaginary pitchers, fielding ground balls that exist only in his mind, and throwing to bases that are marked by sound cues rather than visual targets. The mental demands of this training are extraordinary, requiring Lou to maintain perfect focus and visualization while simultaneously monitoring the acoustic feedback that tells him whether his technique is improving. Eleanor initially worries that Lou's obsession with his echo chamber is becoming unhealthy, isolating him from normal social interaction and family life. She hears him in the basement for hours at a time, sometimes making the same movements hundreds of times while listening for microscopic improvements in the sounds his technique produces. But she also notices that Lou's performance on the field improves dramatically after he begins using the echo chamber, suggesting that his unusual training methods are producing results that justify their intensity. Lou's teammates never learn about the echo chamber because Lou never mentions it and never invites anyone to observe his training sessions. They notice that his technique becomes more refined and consistent than other players, but they attribute these improvements to natural talent and professional dedication rather than to revolutionary training methods that Lou has developed in secret. Lou encourages this misunderstanding because he wants the advantages that his echo chamber training provides to remain exclusively his own. The echo chamber allows Lou to identify and correct technical flaws that would be impossible to detect through conventional training methods. Lou discovers that his left shoulder drops slightly during certain types of swings, a flaw so subtle that it's invisible to coaches and teammates, but creates a distinct acoustic signature that he learns to recognize and eliminate. He identifies inefficiencies in his throwing motion that reduce accuracy by margins too small to notice during games, but significant enough to affect performance over thousands of repetitions. Lou uses his echo chamber to develop what he calls acoustic muscle memory, training his body to associate specific sounds with perfect technique. He practices until the sound of his movements becomes as important as the visual and kinesthetic feedback that most athletes rely on. This acoustic awareness gives Lou an additional sensory channel for monitoring and perfecting his performance, creating redundant systems that ensure consistency even when visual cues are limited or kinesthetic awareness is compromised by fatigue or pressure. The mental aspects of Lou's echo chamber training prove as valuable as the physical improvements. The isolation and sensory focus required for acoustic training develop Lou's concentration abilities far beyond normal levels. He learns to maintain perfect attention for hours at a time, blocking out distractions, while processing multiple streams of sensory information simultaneously. These mental skills transfer directly to game situations, giving Lou extraordinary focus and situational awareness that teammates and opponents notice but can't explain. Lou experiments with different acoustic environments within his echo chamber, sometimes training in complete silence to develop kinesthetic awareness, sometimes creating specific sound patterns that simulate crowd noise or other distractions he might encounter during games. He learns to maintain perfect technique while processing various acoustic distractions, preparing for any sound environment he might face in professional baseball. The echo chamber becomes Lou's laboratory for testing new techniques and approaches before implementing them in games. Lou can experiment with different batting stances, grip positions, and swing mechanics while getting immediate acoustic feedback about their effectiveness. He develops variations of his basic techniques that are optimized for different game situations, practicing until he can execute them with the precision that the echo chamber demands. Lou's most advanced echo chamber training involves practicing entire game scenarios in his mind, while executing the corresponding physical movements and monitoring their acoustic signatures. He visualizes facing specific pitchers, imagines different game situations, and practices his responses while listening for the sound patterns that indicate optimal performance. This mental rehearsal, combined with acoustic feedback, creates preparation that is more thorough and sophisticated than any training methods available to his contemporaries. The echo chamber reveals Lou's understanding of performance psychology decades before sports psychology becomes established as a field. Lou recognizes that peak athletic performance requires integration of mental, physical, and sensory systems, and he designs his training environment to develop all these aspects simultaneously. The acoustic awareness that Lou develops becomes a form of biofeedback that allows him to monitor and optimize his performance in real time. Eleanor discovers the true sophistication of Lou's echo chamber training only after his career ends. When she finds detailed notebooks documenting his acoustic observations, technique modifications, and performance improvements, along with technical drawings that show the engineering precision behind his training environment design. Lou's notes reveal a systematic approach to training that combines scientific observation, experimental methodology, and detailed data collection in ways that professional sports teams won't adopt for decades. His notebooks include acoustic charts that map the sounds of perfect technique, progress tracking that documents microscopic improvements over months and years, and theoretical writings about the relationship between sensory feedback and motor learning that anticipate formal sports science discoveries by generations. Lou's echo chamber represents the ultimate expression of his perfectionist character and his willingness to develop innovative solutions to performance challenges that others accept as unchangeable limitations. While other players rely on conventional training methods and natural talent, Lou creates his own laboratory for discovering the principles of peak performance through systematic experimentation and relentless refinement. The echo chamber gives him advantages that are invisible to competitors but significant enough to contribute to his legendary consistency and skill, demonstrating how individual innovation can create performance improvements that seem miraculous to outside observers, but result from methodical scientific approach applied to athletic training. The room becomes a metaphor for Lou's entire approach to excellence: systematic, scientific, isolated from external validation, focused on objective improvement rather than comparative advantage. Lou doesn't build the echo chamber to impress others or to demonstrate his dedication. He builds it because he believes that perfect practice produces perfect performance, and perfect practice requires conditions that don't exist in normal training environments. Years after Lou's death, sports scientists who study his training methods recognize the echo chamber as decades ahead of its time in understanding the importance of sensory feedback, mental rehearsal, and systematic skill development. Lou's intuitive grasp of performance principles anticipates discoveries about motor learning, concentration training, and sensory integration that won't be formally documented until the rise of modern sports science. The echo chamber stands empty after Lou's illness forces him to retire. But Eleanor preserves it exactly as Lou left it, understanding that the room represents something essential about her husband's character and his approach to pursuing excellence. The space becomes a monument to the idea that true greatness often develops in solitude, through methods that others can't see or understand, driven by internal standards that exceed external expectations. Lou's secret echo chamber reminds us that innovation often happens in private spaces where experimentation is safe from judgment and criticism. His willingness to spend thousands of hours alone practicing techniques that he invented himself demonstrates the kind of dedication and creativity that separates truly exceptional performers from those who rely solely on conventional approaches and natural ability. Who in your life has created their own private laboratory for pursuing excellence? What unconventional methods have you developed for improving your own performance when no one is watching? Lou Gehrig's echo chamber teaches us that the most advanced training often happens in secret, driven by curiosity and perfectionism rather than external recognition or approval.